Monica Carter had lived in her suburban neighborhood for 3 years without any issues. A successful IT consultant, she worked from home most days, relying on a stable internet connection. That morning, however, she noticed something odd. Her Wi-Fi had slowed to a crawl. Frustrated, she logged into her router settings and saw a number of unfamiliar devices connected. Someone had been using her internet without permission. Shaking her head, Monica decided to change the password. A simple fix. She updated it, ensuring that only her own devices remained connected. Within minutes, everything was running smoothly again. She barely gave it another thought as she sipped her coffee and returned to her work. But across the street, Karen Whitman was not having a good day. A self-proclaimed concerned citizen, she had always kept a close eye on the neighborhood. She had noticed Monica moving in a few years back, but had never bothered to introduce herself. As far as Karen was concerned, Monica was an outsider, someone who didn't fit in with the usual crowd. That morning, Karen had been enjoying her usual routine, scrolling through social media while streaming her favorite morning talk show. But suddenly, her internet cut out. The video froze. The screen went blank. Annoyed, she restarted her phone, but nothing changed. She tried reconnecting to Wi-Fi, only to be met with a frustrating message: incorrect password. Karen's eyes narrowed. She had been using the same Wi-Fi for months without issue. At first, she had assumed it was a public connection, but she had never questioned where it was coming from. Now it was gone. It didn't take long for her to realize what had happened. Monica must have changed the password. Karen's frustration quickly turned into anger. How dare Monica cut off her internet? Who did she think she was? With her face turning red, Karen grabbed her phone and did what she always did when she felt threatened. She called 911. Karen tapped her manicured fingers impatiently against her phone as she listened to the ringing. When the dispatcher finally answered, she didn't waste any time. "Yes, I need to report suspicious activity in my neighborhood," she said, her voice laced with urgency. The dispatcher, a calm and collected woman, responded professionally. "Can you describe the situation, ma'am?" Karen huffed. "There's a woman across the street. She's been tampering with the internet. I think she's up to something illegal. She changed the Wi-Fi password, and now no one can use it." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Ma'am, are you saying that someone changed their own Wi-Fi password?" Karen rolled her eyes. "That's not the point. This isn't normal. She just did it out of nowhere. I don't know what she's trying to hide, but it's suspicious." The dispatcher sighed. "Is there any immediate danger? Is anyone hurt?" "Well, I'm inconvenienced, and this woman, she's new here. I don't trust her. She could be—" Karen lowered her voice. "Running some kind of scam, or worse." The dispatcher, clearly unimpressed, maintained her professionalism. "Ma'am, changing a personal Wi-Fi password is not a crime. Unless there's an actual emergency, this isn't a police matter." Karen's face burned with indignation. "So you're just going to ignore a potential cyber threat? What if she's hacking into people's devices? I'm telling you, something isn't right. She doesn't belong here." The dispatcher hesitated. She had dealt with calls like this before, ones laced with entitlement and barely concealed prejudice. "I'll send an officer to check things out," she finally said, if only to end the ridiculous conversation. Karen smirked. "Good, and tell them to hurry." She hung up, feeling victorious. Soon the police would put Monica in her place. What she didn't realize was that she had just set off a chain of events that would expose something far bigger than a simple Wi-Fi password change. Monica was in the middle of preparing dinner when she heard a sharp knock at the door. She frowned, wiping her hands on a towel. She wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the window, her stomach tightened at the sight of a police cruiser parked outside. "What now?" she muttered, heading to the door. Opening it, she was met with two uniformed officers. One, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern expression, stepped forward. "Good evening, ma'am. We received a call about suspicious activity at this address." Monica arched an eyebrow. "Suspicious activity? What kind of activity?" The second officer, a younger man who seemed slightly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. Your neighbor reported that you changed your Wi-Fi password." For a moment, there was silence. Monica blinked, then let out a dry laugh. "You're kidding, right?" The first officer, clearly not in the mood for jokes, shook his head. "No, ma'am. Your neighbor claims you may be engaging in, cyber-related suspicious activity. Monica's jaw tightened. She glanced over their shoulders, and sure enough, Karen was standing on her porch across the street, arms folded, a smug smirk on her face. Monica took a deep breath. Officers, with all due respect, changing my own Wi-Fi password isn't illegal. The younger officer shifted on his feet. No, it isn't, but we still have to check since a report was made. Monica crossed her arms. So let me get this straight. A woman calls 911 because I updated my own Wi-Fi security, and instead of telling her she's being ridiculous, you actually show up at my house? The older officer's expression hardened. We're just following protocol. Monica felt anger bubbling inside her, but she remained calm. Well, if that's the case, then you should also follow protocol for false reports and harassment, because that's what this is. The officers exchanged glances. Karen's smug expression faltered just a little. Monica wasn't about to back down. What started as a petty complaint was quickly turning into something far bigger than Karen had anticipated, and Monica was ready to fight back. Monica took a deep breath, steadying herself. She wasn't about to let this nonsense slide. If Karen thought she could weaponize the police over a Wi-Fi password, she had another thing coming. Officers, Monica said, her voice firm but controlled, I'd like to know, does making a false police report carry any consequences? The younger officer cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Well, technically yes. If a report is knowingly false, it can be considered misuse of emergency services. Monica nodded, her gaze shifting between both officers. Great, because that's exactly what's happening here. The older officer stiffened. Look, ma'am, we're just here to do our job. And I understand that, Monica replied. But let's be honest, do you really think this is a legitimate emergency? Neither officer responded right away. The younger one glanced at Karen, who was still standing on her porch, watching with folded arms. Here's what I think, Monica continued. Karen has been using my Wi-Fi without permission. She got mad when I secured my own network. So instead of dealing with it like an adult, she called 911 and wasted your time. And now, instead of holding her accountable, you're standing here questioning me? The younger officer looked visibly uneasy now. He turned to his partner as if waiting for direction. The older cop, however, wasn't budging. We're not here to argue, ma'am, just to make sure everything's fine. Monica folded her arms. Everything was fine, until she called the police over something ridiculous. The officers exchanged another glance. The younger one sighed. Ma'am, would you be willing to come outside for a moment so we can speak privately? Monica narrowed her eyes. Why do I need to step outside of my own home? Am I being accused of something? The older officer's jaw tightened. No, but it would help us wrap this up quickly. Monica wasn't falling for it. I'm perfectly fine right here. Karen smirked from her porch, clearly thinking she had the upper hand. But Monica wasn't backing down. If Karen thought this would end in her favor, she was in for a rude awakening. Monica stood firm in her doorway, refusing to be intimidated. The older officer seemed frustrated by her unwillingness to comply, but the younger officer appeared more hesitant. Before either could push the issue further, a voice rang out from across the street. Excuse me, officers. Everyone turned to see an elderly man stepping onto his porch. He was in his late 60s, wearing a button-down shirt and slacks, his hands resting on the railing. I saw the whole thing, he continued. And I think you should know that woman, he pointed directly at Karen, has been using this young lady's Wi-Fi for months. Karen's smirk disappeared instantly. What? That's not true, she sputtered. The older officer turned toward the man. And who are you, sir? Name's Mr. Henderson, the man replied, his voice steady. I live right across the street. I sit on this porch every morning and evening, and I've seen Karen over there bragging to her friends about how she doesn't have to pay for internet because she found an open network. She even laughed about it a few weeks ago. Monica's eyebrows shot up. She hadn't expected anyone to come to her defense, much less a neighbor she barely knew. Karen's face turned red. That's ridiculous. You must have misheard. But Mr. Henderson wasn't done. I misheard, huh? I also saw her pacing back and forth on her porch earlier today, throwing a tantrum when she lost access. And now, instead of acting like a grown woman, she's wasting police resources. The younger officer's face hardened. He turned back to Karen. Ma'am, is what he's saying true? Karen shook her head furiously. Of course not. But the damage was already done. The officers exchanged another glance, and this time Monica could see the shift in their demeanor. Karen wasn't the victim here, and now they were beginning to realize it. Karen's face twisted with desperation as she realized her grip on the situation was slipping. She turned back to the officers, hoping to regain control. This is ridiculous. That old man is lying. I have my own internet. I don't need hers, she snapped, crossing her arms defensively. Monica let out a small laugh. Then why did you call the cops when I changed my password, Karen? The officers looked at each other, their patience clearly wearing thin. The younger one, Officer Martinez, took out his notepad. Ma'am, he said, directing his attention to Karen, if you have your own Wi-Fi, can you show us your internet account details? A bill, maybe? Something that proves you don't rely on hers? Karen opened her mouth, but quickly shut it. Her eyes darted around, searching for a way out. I don't have to prove anything. This is harassment. The older officer, Officer Jenkins, sighed. Ma'am, you called us here. We're just trying to understand what crime was actually committed. He turned to Monica. Miss, do you mind confirming once again, did she ever have your permission to use your internet? Monica shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. She must have been using it without me knowing. The moment I changed my password, she started making a scene and called you guys. Karen's hands balled into fists. That's not true. Before she could finish, another voice chimed in. Actually, I can confirm that she's lying. Everyone turned toward the new speaker. Standing at the sidewalk was a delivery driver, still holding a package in his hands. I deliver in this neighborhood every day, the driver said. I've seen her outside talking about how she's been borrowing Wi-Fi. Even joked about how she didn't think her neighbor would notice. Figured it wasn't a big deal, but now she's wasting police time over it. Karen looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Her mouth hung open, but no words came out. The officers glanced at each other again. The story was falling apart, and now Karen was running out of ways to cover her tracks. Karen's face turned pale as the delivery driver's words hung in the air. Monica crossed her arms, staring at her neighbor with an amused yet frustrated expression. You see, Monica said, turning back to the officers, she's been using my Wi-Fi for who knows how long, and now that I've locked her out, she's playing the victim. Officer Martinez sighed, jotting down notes. Ma'am, he said to Karen, we now have a witness stating that you knowingly used Monica's Wi-Fi without permission. That's technically unauthorized access. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's ridiculous. It's just Wi-Fi. It's not like I stole money or broke into her house. Monica shook her head. It's the principle, Karen. You took something that wasn't yours, then called the cops when you got caught. The delivery driver, still standing nearby, chuckled. Man, you really had the nerve to call 911 over this? Officer Jenkins put his notepad away and looked at Karen sternly. Ma'am, do you realize that making a false emergency call is a serious offense? Wasting police resources for something like this could get you fined, or worse. Karen's eyes widened. False call? No, I thought she was doing something illegal. I really believed she was hacking me or something. Monica smirked. Or maybe you just didn't like the idea of a black woman living next door and having control over something you were stealing. The air grew thick with tension. Officer Jenkins sighed, then pulled out his radio. We might need to escalate this. He muttered to his partner. Karen's nervousness spiked. Wait, what are you doing? The officers exchanged glances. We need to verify some things, Officer Martinez said. And depending on what we find, you might be facing charges. Karen's arrogance crumbled in an instant. She had thought she could twist the situation in her favor. But now, the truth was coming out, and it wasn't looking good for her. Karen's nervous expression deepened as Officer Martinez asked, Ma'am, do you have any devices connected to Monica's Wi-Fi? Karen hesitated. No? The delivery driver scoffed. That's a lie, and you know it. Monica stepped forward. Actually, officer, I can prove she was using my internet. She pulled out her phone, tapping a few buttons before showing them the router's connected devices list. There, she said, pointing at an unfamiliar device. That's not mine. Officer Jenkins raised an eyebrow. Karen, is that your device? Karen swallowed hard. I don't know. Maybe? Monica smirked. Oh, you don't know because this device has been connected for months. And guess what? I checked the browsing history. Karen's face turned bright red. You did what? Monica tapped her screen again. Oh yeah, since the router logs data, I saw some interesting things, like hours of streaming, online shopping, and some very questionable websites. The delivery driver chuckled. Wow, so not only were you stealing Wi-Fi, but you were living your best life on someone else's dime. Karen clenched her fists. You had no right to look at that. Officer Martinez sighed. Actually, Monica had every right to check her own network logs, and this just proves you were connected. Karen's breathing quickened. This is crazy. You're invading my privacy, Monica laughed. Oh, the irony. You invade my Wi-Fi, but suddenly your privacy matters? Officer Jenkins shook his head. Ma'am, unauthorized use of a private network is a serious issue, and now that we have evidence, we have to report this. Karen's arrogance was gone. She was cornered, exposed, and panicking, but the worst was yet to come. Karen's panic turned into full-blown desperation. You can't report this. It's just Wi-Fi. Everyone shares it sometimes. Officer Jenkins crossed his arms. Ma'am, you weren't sharing. You were stealing. And based on what Monica found, there's more to this than just freeloading. Karen's eyes darted around. She was calculating her next move, but Monica wasn't done yet. You see, officer, Monica continued, the browsing history didn't just show online shopping and streaming. There were other searches. Karen's face drained of color. Stop. You have no right to. Monica ignored her. I found multiple searches for how to hack a neighbor's Wi-Fi without detection and how to change someone else's router settings remotely. Officer Martinez frowned. Wait, you were trying to take control of Monica's internet? Karen's breathing hitched. And no, it's not what it looks like. Monica smirked. Oh, but it is. You weren't just stealing Wi-Fi. You were trying to make sure I couldn't stop you. The delivery driver let out a low whistle. Wow, that's next-level freeloading. You were planning to hijack her internet permanently? Officer Jenkins pulled out his notepad. Karen, this is no longer just about unauthorized use. If you attempted to access someone else's network without permission, that could be a cybercrime. Karen started shaking her head violently. No, this is insane. You have no proof I did anything. Monica raised an eyebrow. Oh, but I do. My router keeps logs of every attempted login, and guess whose name popped up? Karen gasped. She knew she was trapped, but no one expected what would happen next. Karen's face twisted in sheer panic. You're lying. There's no way you can prove that. Monica smirked and turned her laptop screen around for the officers to see. Actually, my router logs every device that tries to connect. Look at this. Officer Jenkins leaned in, squinting at the screen. What am I looking at? Monica pointed to a section labeled Unauthorized Login Attempts. These are all the times someone tried to access my Wi-Fi without permission. Notice the device name? Karen's stomach dropped. Officer Martinez read it out loud. Karen's iPhone. The delivery driver burst into laughter. Oh, come on. You didn't even try to hide it? Karen turned red. That could be anyone's phone. Monica raised an eyebrow. Really? Because right here, I see another attempt labeled Karen's laptop. And guess what? The MAC address matches the one on your phone. That means both devices belong to the same person. Officer Jenkins exhaled. Wow, this is worse than I thought. Monica wasn't done. But here's the real kicker. When Karen was messing with my internet, she actually connected to my guest network for a few minutes. And that means... She clicked another tab and pointed to the screen. Officer Martinez's eyes widened. Wait a second. This is a record of her online activity? Monica nodded. Yup, and let's just say she wasn't just browsing for cat videos. Karen lunged forward, trying to slam the laptop shut. You have no right to look at that. Officer Jenkins grabbed her wrist midair. Ma'am, I suggest you calm down, because if what Monica's saying is true, you may have a much bigger problem than a Wi-Fi dispute. Karen's breathing became erratic. She knew exactly what was about to be exposed. But nothing could prepare her for what Monica revealed next. Karen's hands trembled as she stared at the laptop screen. This isn't right. You can't just look at my internet history. Monica crossed her arms. Actually, since you connected to my network, anything you did online left traces behind. And let's just say, it's interesting. Officer Martinez scrolled through the records, his expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief. Karen, Do you want to explain why you were accessing fraudulent credit card sites? Karen's breath hitched. What? That's not mine. Someone must have hacked into my phone. Monica clicked on another log entry. Oh, really? Because here's an attempt to access a fake account generator. And look at this. Several searches about bypassing security systems. Officer Jenkins narrowed his eyes. Ma'am, are you involved in some kind of online scam? Karen's face turned ghostly pale. No, this is a mistake. I was just looking things up out of curiosity. The delivery driver let out a low whistle. Curiosity? That's what we're calling cybercrime now? Monica wasn't done. And that's not even the worst part. See this file name? She tapped the screen where a download log appeared. Tenant information, unencrypted.zip. Officer Martinez's head snapped up. Wait, is this what I think it is? Monica nodded. Looks like Karen wasn't just snooping on my Wi-Fi. She was trying to steal personal information. This file contains sensitive data about my neighbors. Karen took a shaky step backward. This is insane. I didn't mean to. Officer Jenkins pulled out his handcuffs. Ma'am, I think we've heard enough. You have the right to remain silent. Karen's world spun. She had called the cops on Monica, convinced she had the upper hand. But now she was the one facing arrest. And worse, there was still more to uncover. Karen's mouth went dry as Officer Jenkins snapped the cold metal cuffs around her wrists. This is a misunderstanding, she shrieked, her voice rising in desperation. I was just checking something out. I didn't steal anything. Monica scoffed. Oh, really? Because my network logs say otherwise. She turned to the officers. Karen wasn't just nosy. She was trying to access private tenant records. She was looking up identity theft tricks. Who knows what else she's been up to? Officer Martinez tightened his grip on Karen's arm. Ma'am, we're going to have to take you in for questioning. Karen struggled. You can't do this. I called you. I was the victim. She changed the Wi-Fi password. How is that a crime? The delivery driver shook his head. Lady, you tried to frame her for something that wasn't even illegal, and in the process, you exposed your own crimes. That's karma. Monica folded her arms. Not only did you waste police resources, but you've been spying on your neighbors for who knows how long. Officer Jenkins turned to Monica. We'll need to take your statement and possibly collect more evidence from your Wi-Fi logs. If Karen was snooping around on your network, there might be more victims. Karen thrashed. No, you can't. Officer Martinez leaned in, lowering his voice. Karen, listen carefully. If we find anything else, bank fraud, identity theft, anything, you'll be looking at federal charges. It might be in your best interest to cooperate. Karen's eyes darted around frantically. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had been so sure Monica was the villain. But now, standing in handcuffs, she realized she wasn't just caught. She was exposed. And the worst part, Monica wasn't done yet. As the officers escorted Karen toward the squad car, Monica turned to Officer Jenkins. I need to know, what exactly happens now? Jenkins sighed, flipping through his notepad. Well, Karen is being taken in for unauthorized access to a private network and potential identity theft. But we'll need more evidence to charge her with anything bigger. Monica nodded. Then you'll want to see this. She pulled up her Wi-Fi security logs and showed the officers the suspicious activity, multiple unauthorized login attempts, repeated pings to various financial sites, and even an attempt to access tenants' private lease agreements. Officer Martinez's brows furrowed. This isn't just some nosy neighbor behavior. This looks criminal. Karen, still in cuffs, tried to twist around. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. You don't know what kind of people live here. Monica's patience snapped. Oh, we know exactly what kind of people live here. Karen, people who mind their business. People who don't spy on others and try to ruin their lives for no reason. Karen's face turned red, but she had no defense left. Just then, another officer approached holding a tablet. You won't believe this, he said, eyes wide. We ran a quick check on Karen's internet activity, and we found multiple reports of fraudulent credit card applications linked to her name. Jenkins let out a low whistle. Looks like she's been using her little neighborhood watch excuse to commit full-on fraud. Monica felt a mix of relief and disbelief. Karen had tried to paint her as a criminal, but in the end, the truth had come out, and it was far worse than anyone expected. And judging by the look on Officer Jenkins' face, Karen's troubles were only just beginning. The neighborhood was still buzzing with chatter as Karen was placed in the back of the police car. People had gathered outside their homes, whispering among themselves, watching the scene unfold. Some recorded on their phones, while others simply stared in disbelief. "How did she get away with this for so long?" one neighbor muttered. Officer Jenkins turned to Monica. "We're going to need an official statement from you. Would you be willing to come down to the station later?" Monica nodded. "Absolutely. I want to make sure she's held accountable for everything she's done." Just then, a middle-aged man hesitantly stepped forward. He was one of Karen's neighbors, someone who had always kept to himself. I think I have something that might help." He held up a folder. "She's been harassing me too, digging into my records. I thought I was just being paranoid, but now—" Officer Martinez took the folder and flipped through the documents. His eyes widened. "This is more evidence of identity theft. She's been using personal information from multiple people in the neighborhood." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Monica shook her head. "She tried to make me look like a criminal, all while she was stealing from the very people she claimed to be protecting." Karen, sitting in the back of the police car, banged her head against the seat. "This isn't fair. I was just doing what was right. I was protecting our community." Jenkins let out a dry laugh. "Protecting it? Karen, you weren't protecting anyone. You were exploiting them." The reality of the situation finally seemed to sink in. Karen slumped in her seat, her face pale. She had spent years controlling the neighborhood, watching, manipulating. But now, the entire community was watching her, and they weren't looking away. For the first time, Karen had no control, and this time she had no one to save her. Karen sat in the back of the police car, her hands trembling, as the weight of her actions finally caught up with her. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the windows of the surrounding houses, illuminating the faces of the neighbors who had gathered to watch her downfall. Monica took a deep breath, turning to Officer Jenkins. "What happens now?" "She'll be taken in for processing," Jenkins explained. "With all the evidence stacking up against her, she'll likely face charges for identity theft, harassment, and filing a false police report." Karen's mouth fell open. "Wait, what? Identity theft? That's ridiculous. You have no proof." Officer Martinez held up the folder the neighbor had handed over. "Actually, we do. And that's just the beginning. Once we start digging, I'm sure we'll find a lot more." Karen's face drained of color. "This isn't happening," she muttered under her breath, shaking her head in disbelief. Monica, standing tall, felt a sense of relief wash over her. For so long, she had tolerated Karen's microaggressions, her passive-aggressive remarks, and now, her outright attempt to criminalize her. But now, justice was finally being served. The crowd began murmuring, some nodding in agreement, others still in shock. "It's about time," an older woman said. "She's been a problem for years." As the officers prepared to leave, Monica turned back toward her house. She glanced at her phone and saw a message from her boss. "We're so sorry for what happened. Expect a call from HR. We want to make this right." For the first time in a long time, Monica felt like she had won. As the police car drove off with Karen inside, the neighborhood seemed to exhale. The air felt lighter, freer. Justice had finally arrived on Willow Lane, and Karen, she had no idea what was waiting for her next. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. What would you have done in this situation? Subscribe for more eye-opening stories that challenge perspectives and reveal the truth.